session on primary authority, basics on primary authority. I'm Kate Harris. I work in the local delivery team at OPSS, and I'm going to be taking you through this short session this afternoon. I can see people are still joining, so I'm going to give those a minute or so. For those of you who haven't seen, I've shared the slides that I'm going to be running through with you in the chat as a PDF so that you can get those up on your own screen. It's a bit more reliable for me than trying to share my screen with you. I hope that's okay. If you have any problems opening them, post a message in the chat and we will be able to arrange to have those emailed to you. I've got a couple of bits of housekeeping to run through with you first. So first of all, if I can ask, when you're not speaking, please can you ensure that your camera's off and your microphone is muted, just so that we avoid any background noise during the session. I'm going to be recording this session. You might have already noticed that, we've already started. And the session will be shared with all delegates afterwards. So just be mindful of that when you're posting in the chat, because your comments will be shared with others. If for any reason your laptop or internet has an issue today, you might want to make a note of the dial-in number so that you can dial back into the session. And as I've said, you'll still be able to see the slides because you've got a PDF of them. The details for dialing in are going to be posted in the chat now by my colleague Nicole. Please do use the chat function as we go through the session for any of your thoughts, comments or questions, and we'll respond to these at the end if we've got time. And you can also raise your hand if you've got something to say, and we may be able to take your comment or question during the session, or if not, again, we'll try our best to do it at the end. Okay, so this session is all about primary authority. We've only got 40 minutes in total, and normally the primary authority kind of introductory level training that we offer here at OPSS is a 5 or 6 hour session. So it's going to be a bit whistle stop, I'm afraid today, but I'll try and get through as much as I can with you. I'm conscious that we are going to have a mix of people on the call, some who know very little about primary authority and some who know quite a lot, but hopefully everybody will be able to pick up some bits of information from the session today, and if not, you can contact us after with any questions that you have. Okay, so hopefully if you open your slides, or people having problems with the slides, let me see. Actually, not allowing, just okay. I think Nicole, my colleague, is on the case and will change the formats that you can see those. Okay, our other option is I can try, or Nicole, are you able to try and share the screen?
Yep, no problem.
Thank you.
Just bear with me a second. Yeah, you should be able to see those now.
Well, thank you, Nicole. Okay, so this is primary authority basics. I'm going to keep it really simple. So if we go on to the next slide, Nicole, please. And first of all, we're just going to talk. Oh. Yeah, okay, we're just going to talk a little bit about the basics of primary authority, the scope of primary authority, primary authority partnerships, the tools that are available within the scheme, and then some key messages for you to take away with you today. Next slide, please, Nicole. Thank you. So first of all, understanding primary authority. Next slide. What is primary authority, first of all? So primary authority is a scheme defining a legally recognised partnership between a business and a single local authority. And that single local authority becomes that business's primary authority. The scheme is legally recognised because it has some legislation sitting behind it. So the Regulatory Enforcement and Sanctions Act 2008 is the piece of legislation that defines the scheme. So it's a statutory scheme, not a voluntary scheme. Okay, Nicole, thank you. So the basics. The Secretary of State actually nominates a primary authority to be a primary authority. And that authority is then able to give advice and guidance to a business or a group of businesses. The primary authority is also able to guide and give advice to other local authorities about their primary authority partner. If one of those other local authorities disagrees with the advice and guidance and chooses to take enforcement action, which goes against the primary authority advice that's been issued, the primary authority can direct them not to do so. So what does it deliver? So for a business, primary authority offers a place where they can go to get reliable regulatory advice and a single point of contact. The scheme's been around now for maybe 11 years. And the voice that was coming from some businesses before primary authority existed was that businesses could get advice from local authorities, but that advice might differ slightly depending on which local authority you went to. So businesses really wanted to have a single point of contact that they could go to seek advice that then would be taken account of and respected by other local authorities. So they could just go to one local authority with a question and get an answer that they could then rely on. So it sounds great for businesses, but what about for local authorities? So primary authority has benefits for authorities as well as for business. If one local authority, the primary authority, builds up a detailed picture of a business, understands its well, its systems of compliance, and is giving advice to it, they can then share information on that business with other local authorities, meaning that those other local authorities are also better informed about that business. They don't have to ask the business all of those same questions because the primary authority has done that for them. So for enforcing authorities, they should be better informed, and that should hopefully lead to them being more effective in their regulation and improving their targeting of resources. The whole scheme delivers better information and intelligence sharing between business and local regulators, and in doing so should drive up compliance. The Office for Product Safety and Standards is the government department that oversees the primary authority scheme. It's one of the tools that we look after. We host a primary authority register, which is a website where you can go to look at the list of primary authority partnerships. So anybody can access this. You can go and have a look at who McDonald's is partnered with, or Tesco or IKEA, and you can find out who their primary authority partner is. If you're a local authority regulator, you can also get a login to access the secure part of that website, where you'll be able to look at not just who is partnered with who, but what information the primary authority has posted about their business partner. So it might be things like frequently asked questions that regulators often ask about that business partner, or it might be a plan that tells you when you inspect that partner, the specific things that you're best looking at. So where is your time best spent? There might be information on compliance systems or what to do if you have a complaint about that partner. So that part of the primary authority register, this website, is only accessible to local authorities, so those with a gov.uk email address, and it contains important information about that primary authority partnership that should benefit you if you're a local authority regulator. The Office for Product Safety and Standards support the effective delivery and growth of the scheme. And one of the important documents that the Office for Product Safety and Standards produces is the Statutory Guidance, which sits alongside the scheme. And this is a really well-written document that basically takes you through everything you need to know about primary authority, whether you are a primary authority yourselves or an enforcing authority who is engaging with a primary authority. As well as that, we facilitate some primary authority regional networks. These are quite new, actually. The network that I'm looking after is the London network. We've only had one meeting so far, but we're bringing together primary authorities from across the region, in my case, London, together with enforcing authorities to talk about how we can better share best practice and promote consistency and support local delivery, so support both primary authorities and enforcing authorities in the regions. We also facilitate some expert panels. So there are a number of primary authority expert panels. Some of you might be aware of a number of these. So in the last few months, we have facilitated a number of new expert panels, specifically looking at COVID-related matters. And these panels bring together primary authorities that are working with a particular sector. So, for example, hospitality or retail. They bring these primary authorities together so, again, that they can be consistent with each other, support one another and promote best practice within that sector. If you're interested in the primary authority regional networks or the primary authority expert panels, please do let us know, because again, we can send you the information for those. We can post an email address for you in the chat. You can drop us a note if you'd like to be part of any of those. The Office for Product Safety and Standards also manages the nomination of partnerships. So there's a consent process that primary authorities need to go through if you're going to become a primary authority for a particular business or group of businesses. The nomination is all carried out through the primary authority register, so it's all electronic. Yourself as a primary authority and the partner need to complete a process, and then your partnership is considered and hopefully consented to before you then appear as the official primary authority on the register. There's also a consent process for when primary authorities are using some of the tools that are available to them. This includes the inspection plan. I'm going to come on to inspection plans a little bit later, but again, the Office for Product Safety manages the consent process for inspection plans. And then also we manage the determination process. I won't have time today to go into too much detail about the determination process, but there is a session tomorrow if any of you are more interested in that. Again, a 40-minute session on primary authority determinations. Determinations basically are when a primary authority and an enforcing authority disagree, and the enforcing authority might want to take enforcement action against a business in a primary authority, and the primary authority disagrees that should be happening. When no resolution can be sought, we have a formal process that both parties can go through to deliver an outcome that we hope is satisfactory to everybody. Okay, next slide, please, Nicole. So the scope of primary authority. Thank you. The regulatory scope is defined in law, but put simply, most trading standards and most environmental health legislation is within scope of primary authority. And if you have a look at the statutory guidance document that I referred to earlier, I have mine here, you'll see it's rather scribbled on. I know you can't see because I've got a background. Anyway, mine's all scribbled on. But there's a figure in there, figure 1, which takes you through the legislation which is within scope of primary authority. Once a primary authority signs up with a business partner, it becomes its primary authority for all of the regulatory functions that are within scope and that local authority delivers. So, for example, if you're a London borough signing up a business to become their primary authority, you become their primary authority for all environmental health and all trading standards legislation, because as a London borough, you have a remit for trading standards and environmental health. Whereas if you were a district council and you sign up with a business, you can only offer in this example, environmental health functions, because you don't deliver any trading standards regulatory functions yourself. Okay, next slide, Nicole. Devolution. So primary authority does apply differently across the nations of the country. So in Scotland and Northern Ireland, primary authority only applies to relevant functions where they are reserved and enforced by local authorities. An English primary authority can become a primary authority for English legislation relating to agriculture, food, environmental protection, pollution control, housing and public health. And a Welsh primary authority can become a primary authority for functions that relate to devolved Welsh matters, these being the same: agriculture, food, environmental protection, pollution control, housing and public health. So it's worth saying here that if you've got a business that trades across perhaps both England and Wales, and they're a food business, that food business would need to have a primary authority based in both England and Wales if they wanted coverage across both nations. Okay, next slide, please, Nicole. So primary authority, who can offer it? So a local authority can offer primary authority under the regulatory functions that they have responsibility for. So this includes county councils, unitary councils, district councils, fire and rescue services, port health authorities. But remember, we need to take into account devolved legislation. So an English primary authority could not become primary authority for a business that is solely based in Wales, because in England we don't regulate Welsh regulation. The suitability to become a primary authority needs to be confirmed by the Secretary of State, and as I've mentioned, OPSS manage that consent process. So there are two types of primary authority partnership that can be formed. First of all, you've got the direct partnership between a business and a local authority. So an example of this would be one of the supermarkets. For argument's sake, let's select Waitrose. Waitrose can have a primary authority partnership, as they do, with a single local authority. And that's just a direct partnership between that business and that one local authority. However, you might get a group of businesses that want to form a primary authority partnership. And that group of businesses might be unrelated to each other, except for the fact that they all have a coordinator in common. So an example would be a trade association. You might have lots of independent businesses who are all members of a trade association, and that trade association may well be responsible for giving them advice about complying with the law. In this situation, that coordinator, the trade association, could form a partnership with a local authority, and the local authority would become the primary authority for that trade association. And all of those independent businesses within that regulated group, so the members of that trade association, would then benefit from that primary authority partnership. If you go on to the next slide, Nicole. So this slide really just takes us through that example in a diagram. So we've got 4 different businesses there. They don't necessarily know each other. They're independent businesses. If you click once, Nicole. Yeah, so they're all members of perhaps a trade association, and that trade association may be giving them advice on how they comply with the law. They might be providing them with packs that they fill in, and that trade association forms a primary authority partnership with a single local authority. And if you just click once more, Nicole, thank you. That trade association becomes the statutory partner in the scheme. So they are part of the primary authority partnership. That trade association may ask questions and ask for information from the primary authority and receive advice and information back, which they then disseminate to all of those independent businesses. So in this case, it's slightly different to a direct partnership, the example I just gave with Waitrose, because the local authority is going through a coordinator in order to be able to give all of these businesses guidance and advice. Okay, thanks, Nicole. So the tools available to a primary authority. So a primary authority's role is to lead regulation of a business or a group of businesses on behalf of local authority regulators. A primary authority is not there to protect or shield a business if it's done something wrong. It's there to lead regulation and guide regulation to make sure that that business is regulated in the most risk-based and efficient way that it can be. And a primary authority has a number of tools to help them do that. So first of all, they can issue advice, primary authority advice to a business. And there's a template for doing this that's available on gov.uk. There'll be some links at the end of the presentation. So a business might come to a primary authority and say, look, this is our system for complying with this particular law. Can you have a look at it for me and tell me if this is compliant? Am I doing the right thing? The primary authority is able to do that and give that advice back to the business firm, whether or not they're doing the right thing. If they are, they can issue that as what we call primary authority advice to the business. The second tool that a primary authority has available to them is an inspection plan. And again, there's a template or templates available on gov.uk, and the link will be at the end of the presentation. Primary authorities can also give advice to authorities to tell them how to go about regulating the business that they're actually partnered with. So I'm just going to run through these in a little bit more detail now. So primary authority advice. So as I've said, you might have a business that has a question, and before primary authority, they might not have known who to ask that question of, especially if they've got lots of different outlets across the country. They could go to lots of different local authorities and hopefully they'd get the same answer from each one, but we're not 100% sure that they would. So they can now go to their primary authority and ask a question like, how does this particular law apply to my operation? So it might be something like Sunday trading law, and they're a business that does a lot of click and collect, or they do a lot of online orders on a Sunday, and they might be thinking, oh, well, Sunday trading law's quite old. This wasn't around when click and collect wasn't around when this law was introduced. How does that law now apply to my business? And the primary authority can have a look at the law, have a look at the business operation, and give them an answer about how that law applies to them. Or the business might have developed a system of complying with a certain law. For example, they might have developed some risk assessments, and they might want the primary authorities to have a look at their risk assessments and tell them whether they're suitable and sufficient. And the primary authority can do that. If they are, they can issue primary authority advice to that business so the business knows they're doing the right thing. The primary authority could also issue advice to other local authorities. So they could say, okay, we're aware of an issue in our partner's business. We've now investigated it, and we're now going to make that answer available to all other local authorities so that if this issue is raised to you, you don't necessarily need to do the same investigation. If a primary authority wants to do that, they want to tell other local authorities not to investigate something again because they've already done it once. The Secretary of State has to consent to that. So they have to apply to the Secretary of State and they will say yes or no. Can the primary authority direct other local authorities in this way? And that's a safeguard to ensure that primary authorities who have this big responsibility now are doing the right thing by other local authorities. Okay, next slide, Nicole, please. Thank you. So I mentioned primary authority advice, and if you know anything about a primary authority, you may have heard the term assured advice being used before. So assured advice is basically just another word or term that's come to be used for primary authority advice, and this is advice that can be relied upon by a business. So if a business has primary authority advice, so for example, a primary authority has said that some risk assessments are suitable and sufficient, and another local authority disagrees with that and proposes to take enforcement action against the business, the primary authority is able to direct that enforcing authority not to take the enforcement action because it's inconsistent with advice that they have already given to the business. So primary authorities can't just willy-nilly tell local authorities not to take enforcement action. They must have issued primary authority advice first. So then the primary authority advice must specifically cover the topic that the enforcement action is being proposed about. So the important thing for primary authorities, if any of you are, is to make sure that when you're giving advice to your business partner, you're issuing it where appropriate as primary authority advice that that business partner can then rely on. Okay, thank you, Nicole. So the other tool that I mentioned was inspection plans. So inspection plans are developed by a primary authority to guide other local authorities in the checks that they should be doing at a local level. So inspection plans won't typically say, don't bother inspecting anymore. They'll generally say, go and do your inspection as you otherwise would. But when you're there, these are the best things for you to focus on. This is where your time is best spent. And as a primary authority, I'm able to tell you that because I know this business well, I know where their risk lies, and I know where your valuable time as a regulator will have most impact. So inspection plans should improve targeting and focus, and they will usually ask officers who are using them to provide feedback back to that primary authority. The feedback is really vital because it provides the primary authority with intelligence and enables them to build a really detailed picture of their business partner and how they're operating at sites around the country. So it may well be that a primary authority has assessed business systems, but actually what they really want to know is how well they're working in practice. And by enforcing authorities providing feedback to them, they build up this really detailed picture of how well businesses are doing on the ground. Thank you. Thanks, Nicole. So I'm coming to the end of the slides. Just a few key messages that I'd like you to take away. And then if anybody's got any questions, I'll hopefully be able to help you with them. So the key messages is that primary authority is a statutory scheme. The Regulatory Enforcement and Sanctions Act introduced primary authority and set the scheme in law. Primary authority is there to help local regulators to do their job in the most risk-based and efficient way. It's really well established now. We had the 10-year birthday of primary authority earlier this year. I think the scheme's actually probably 11 years old, but it's really well established in many sectors. And there's over 100,000 businesses who now have access to primary advice through primary authority partnerships. The primary authority register that I mentioned holds all of the information that you need. So please do have a look at it and do use it if you're an enforcing authority. Excuse me. Make sure you've got your own individual login. Somebody in your local authority should be able to set you up with a login if you haven't got one. Any problems, the email address to contact us at will be on the last slide. And make sure you're familiar with the system. If you're out doing proactive work, you need to know about primary authority because there's every chance the business that you're dealing with has a primary authority partnership, and there'll be information there that's able to help you. Guidance on primary authority is available on the primary authority register. So next slide, Nicole, please. So we have a primary authority help desk. The number's there on the screen for you now, and an email address. Our support unit takes many calls from primary authorities, enforcing authorities, businesses. So by all means, if you've got any questions or you need help, do get in touch with them. They're excellent. We offer primary authority training. So we've got 3 primary authority training products that we run. We have an introduction to primary authority course, and this course is for for all local authority regulators who are interested in primary authority. So whether you're a primary authority yourself or an enforcing authority, you can attend one of our training sessions to get the information that you need about the scheme. We then run a second course. It's called Making an Impact. And this course is for primary authorities who are actively working on partnerships to make sure you're getting the we then run a inspection plan workshop. So if you're a partnership, you're looking at developing an inspection plan, you can get some bespoke training with your partner to help you put together your first inspection plan. The Primary Authority Register website address is there, and for any of our resources about primary authority, again, the website address is there for you to be able to access after the session. So that's all my slides. Let's have a look. So we've got a question here from Barry. How effective is primary authority when dealing with some of the larger global businesses such as Amazon and eBay? So interesting question, Barry. I know that eBay and Amazon both do have primary authority partnerships. So you may be testing me, but I think eBay is with Westminster and Amazon is with Newham, certainly for food safety, or certainly was. How effective are they? I can't personally comment on how effective they are. I know that both Westminster and Newham are very active primary authorities. In terms of their effectiveness, yeah, I can't actually answer that on the call, but I do know they have primary authorities. They're well-established primary authorities. And yeah, perhaps if you have access to the Primary Authority Register, you could log on and have a look at the type of information that those primary authorities are posting to help local authority regulators as they go about regulating these businesses. Okay. Oh, you live in Newham. Okay, I'm not far from you either. I'm just next borough along. Okay, so Teresa's posted a question. Where can local authorities go to get support? So if you're a local authority thinking about entering into your first primary authority partnership, or you're a local authority who's not, but you feel like you need to know a bit more about the scheme or be a bit more engaged in the scheme, as I mentioned, that we do have primary authority regional groups now. They're quite new, but there is a group for each area of England and a group for Wales, which I think is just about getting up and running. If you email the email address that Nicole posted on the chat earlier, so local regulatory delivery at bays.gov.uk, we would be able to direct you to the contact for your regional group. And these groups are all about support, promoting best practice, local authorities supporting one another in their primary authority partnerships, and also the opportunity for those who don't have partnerships to give some feedback on how they're finding the scheme. So just going back to Barry's question, it might be that, you know, some enforcing authorities wanted to ask that question to Westminster or Newham, you know, how do you deal with Amazon or eBay? And in these PA regional groups, there would be the opportunity for that type of conversation to be happening, as well as, of course, as in our expert panel groups as well. Yes, Barry, if you've got the PDF of the slides, then there's nothing in there that is restricted, so it can be shared with your colleagues. That's absolutely fine. If you do need any more information, by all means do come back to me. I'm more than happy to help. And yeah, as Nicole said, she will be able to circulate the PDF at the end of the session as well. If there are no more questions, I think we can draw the session to a close. So I'll just say thank you for joining me today. If you haven't been at any of the other sessions today, there's some really good sessions still happening. The next session today is a diversity and inclusion session, and my colleagues Kadeja and Teresa will be leading that session. So I encourage you to join that. If you haven't signed up and you'd like to, then again, that email address, and if you contact there. And then we've got sessions for the next 2 days as well. So have a look, see if there's anything you fancy. If you haven't signed up, again, email the email address that Nicole provided to you. Okay, all right. Thank you, everybody. Hope you have a good rest of the afternoon.